I'm pleased to be here today, Hampden District Attorney Anthony Gulluni, to announce a significant arrest from a case from 2005 out of this city, Holyoke. I do want to first express my sympathies to the family and friends of Jesse Rosario, who was the victim of this case back in March of 2015. With respect to the details, on March 17, 2005, detectives from the Holyoke Police Department and the Massachusetts State Police Detective Unit assigned to the Hampden District Attorney's Office, as well as Massachusetts Crime Scene Services, responded to the scene of a gunshot victim on Beacon Street in Holyoke at about 12:32 in the morning. Upon arrival in response to the initial report of a gunshot victim, officers from the Holyoke Police Department found the victim lying on the ground in what appeared to be critical condition. Officers immediately began administering medical assistance until an emergency response arrived on scene. The victim was transported to Bay State Medical Center, where he was pronounced deceased. The victim was later identified as Jesse Rosario, 25 years of age, of Holyoke, Massachusetts. The ensuing investigation identified Joey Camacho, 29 years of age at the time, and from Springfield, Massachusetts, as the suspect in the murder of Mr. Rosario. Law enforcement then began a search for Mr. Camacho, but in spite of several leads on his whereabouts, it yielded no results back in 2005. At that point, the State Police Violent Fugitive Apprehension Section was asked to assist in locating Mr. Camacho, who was placed on the Massachusetts State Police Most Wanted list in October of 2005. Throughout the ensuing year, 3 fast troopers and members of the United States Marshals District of Massachusetts Fugitive Task Force assisted state and local homicide detectives in determining Mr. Camacho's whereabouts. Law enforcement never stopped looking for Mr. Camacho. Earlier this year, their investigation revealed that Mr. Camacho was possibly using the alias of Gerald Torres, and that he may have been stopped under that name for a motor vehicle violation in Miami, Florida, and arrested actually for operating after license suspension. Following his booking and release pending a court appearance in Florida, investigators determined that in fact Mr. Torres' fingerprints, as he was being called, were those of Mr. Camacho, and that alerted law enforcement to further investigation. When Mr. Camacho, appearing as Mr. Torres, appeared at a Miami courthouse this Wednesday for a scheduled court appearance, members of the U.S. Marshals Florida Regional Task Force were conducting surveillance of that facility. They observed Mr. Camacho, and at that time, task force members converged on him and placed him under arrest. He was charged as a fugitive from justice in Miami, Florida, where he still remains. Prosecutors in my office, the Hampden County District Attorney's Office, will work with Florida counterparts to arrange Mr. Camacho's rendition to face charges for murder and the death of Mr. Jesse Rosario here in Hampden County in the Massachusetts court system in the months to come. I want to highlight my appreciation to the Holyoke Police Department and the Massachusetts State Police Detective Unit for a fine investigation back in 2005 that really never ended. And of course, I want to thank sincerely, as I find occasion often, to thank the members of the Massachusetts State Police Violent Fugitive Apprehension Section, a couple of whom are represented here, including their lieutenant. I also want to thank the U.S. Marshal's Office for the fine work they do in assisting in this investigation. This is really a terrific example of several law enforcement agencies at different levels coming together, not only to solve a murder, but also never putting the case down, never resting, despite work as it comes day in and day out. They never forget these cases. And the work of the Violent Fugitive Apprehension Section, as well as the U.S. Marshal's Office, really stayed on this case. It was a high priority to bring Mr. Camacho back, to face charges, and to work on behalf of the victim's family to make sure that we bring justice for them as well. So I thank them sincerely. I really appreciate all the work that we do in all our projects, but in this case, it's just an exemplary example of law enforcement and the work across boundaries and across different units and levels of law enforcement that brings success and will ultimately bring a prosecution. So thank you.